everyone, welcome to our webinar about prototyping for medical devices. Today we will learn how prototyping and ProtoPie can drive innovation to improve human lives. Right, before we kick off, we would love to hear where you're joining us from. So head over to the chat and let us know. Let's see, I see a lot of people already joining. Switzerland. Hello, Melissa. Hi, Dimitar from Copenhagen. Good morning, good afternoon, I guess. Hi, Donald from Nigeria. Hi, Vivian. Hi, Joanna from Portugal. Hi from France. Bonjour. Hi from South Korea. Thank you for joining. Joseph. Hi, John. Hi, Bridget. Okay. We will wait a few more seconds for people to trickle in, and then we will get started. We're super excited to have everyone join us today. Okay. Hi, Maritina from Amsterdam. Hi from Paris. Right, I would like to remind everyone to select everyone when sending their messages, so we can all see them. Okay, now my name is Julia, and today I'll be your host. Now let's meet today's speakers, shall we? It is my honor to introduce you to my colleague Rebecca Carretas, a customer success manager here at ProtoPie. Rebecca is here to give you a short introduction to the world of ProtoPie, along with some of our newest updates. Rebecca, would you like to say hi to the audience?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I hope you all go with really wonderful insights today and really take a lot of advantage of this webinar, as our speaker has a lot to share with you. So, yeah, thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, today's webinar features Sunrise Labs, a well-known company based in the United States that specializes in developing innovative medical devices and life science instrumentation designs. It is my honor to introduce you to Alex Therrien, the director of user-centered design at Sunrise Labs, with over 20 years of experience in applying user-centered design methodologies. Alex has successfully developed medical devices for home dialysis, connected drug delivery, mobile apps for medical industries, and surgical procedures. Alex, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Hopefully, we'll give you some interesting things from how to apply the product to successful innovations in medical device space, but also a little bit about our own process about how we develop complex medical device interfaces using ProtoPie. So I'm glad to be here, and it's wonderful to have so many people from around the world joining us.
Likewise, Alex, it's great to have you here. Now, let's see today's agenda. So Rebecca is going to give you a short intro to ProtoPie, like I just mentioned. Then Alex will talk to us about how Sunrise Labs design teams use ProtoPie and prototyping to drive innovation for improving human lives. And then at the end of the session, we will wrap up with a live Q&A session, which is why I would encourage all of you to ask your questions during the webinar in the Q&A window here in Zoom, and we will cover them at the end. This way, we make sure that we make the most out of today's sessions. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Rebecca?
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Oh. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna give you a brief introduction of ProtoPie, as Yuli mentioned, and also share with you some updates this year with one of our biggest release. So first of all,
Rebecca, can you click a slideshow so we can see the full screen?
Oh, you cannot see a slideshow right now?
Not yet.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, ProtoPie. What is ProtoPie? ProtoPie is a tool that actually enables design teams to bring their ideas to life and validate them by actually creating high fidelity prototypes, sorry. And the best of it is like they do not need any single line of code. Okay, but ProtoPie is actually not only a single platform, it is actually a whole ecosystem. So first of all, we have ProtoPie Studio. That's where everything starts, right? With our import plugins, you can actually bring your static designs from your favorite design tools and add them to ProtoPie Studio. And you can start adding your interactions there. I don't know if some of you might know how our interaction model, our conceptual model actually works, but it's pretty much based on adding triggers to an object and also adding some responses. And then we have the ProtoPie player, where actually once you have your prototypes already, you can test them on your real devices, on your target devices, and you can allow also your stakeholders to fully interact with your prototypes. Now, you can use the native sensors and gestures of your devices, such as, for example, keyboard. You can also use voice and camera. Next, we have ProtoPie Cloud. This is our collaboration platform. So here, you can actually, depending on your plan too, you can actually manage teams and projects. But pretty much here is where you store all your prototypes and you can share them. And you can share them actually very safely, because we also have a feature that allows you to add some password protection to it. And more than that, it is actually possible to conduct moderated user testing here. For now, this is closed beta for enterprise users, but yeah, I do encourage some of them to actually use this feature because yeah, it opens up more doors. And we also have our handoff feature, which enables you to communicate your interaction to your developers. So if we go further, we also have ProtoPie Connect, which is an extension app in ProtoPie. With ProtoPie Connect, what you can do is actually connect multiple devices. And we're not only talking about tablets or mobile, but we're also talking about automotive. You can use a smartwatch and also TV and gamepads, etc. So ProtoPie Connect is part of our Pro and Enterprise plan. So allowing you to connect with hardware and also API. And okay, so now I'm gonna introduce our new features this year. So as I said, 7.8 was one of our biggest release, as we're always trying to put effort into adding more features that actually give users a way to improve their productivity and also the expressiveness of their prototypes. We added the barcode scanner first. We had already the QR code scanner. So just by using the camera on your device, you can actually scan a barcode and get all the information of a product. So I'm just going to show you a short video of how it works.
Let me show you how easy it is to make a multi-device delivery experience with ProtoPie. The driver has arrived. We'll continue the experience on the phone. All it takes is a simple message, and the delivery is handed off. We use a smartphone to scan the package. Just add a camera layer, turn it into a barcode scanner. Package delivered. The tablet gets the message, and so does the smartwatch. Multi-device and scanning interaction in ProtoPie. Start learning at learn.protopie.io.
Okay, so yeah, as you saw, connecting multiple devices, actually a perfect companion for this is ProtoPie Connect. And
let me show you how easy it is.
Now let me go to the next slide. We also had custom eSIM presets, you know, or previously known as eSIM animations. Now you have the possibility to actually save your eSIM presets and reuse them later. And not only that, but you could also share this with your team members, because we allow you now to first export these customized eSIM presets and also import them again in case you change devices. We also added audio recording in our preview mode inside ProtoPie Studio. So now you can not only add sound, but you can also add voice to the recording of your prototype in case you want to narrate, for example, how your prototype works. Then we have a highly requested feature, custom fonts. Don't get discouraged, for now it is only part of the enterprise plan, but around the end of the year, we're planning to release also Google Fonts for all our Pro Plan users. So yeah, with this feature, you can actually have consistency within your prototypes, when you share them throughout all the ecosystem in ProtoPie. And then we also have a handoff in Studio. So this is an already known feature. However, we have made it more accessible for our users. So whenever you're ready to share your prototypes with your developers, you can just go to the top right corner inside Studio, and you can open up to the interaction recording pages where all the details of your interactions are there, like such as duration, delay, easing, etc. So yeah, we're always, as I said, trying to give you new features, to help you in your workflow. And also, if you want to see more about, what kind of prototypes you can do in ProtoPie, we just made a new ProtoPie gallery. So I will be sharing the link later. But yeah, you can explore everything that our users have been doing. And also, I think you will be inspired to also create some amazing prototypes. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Now, yeah, let's hand the mic over to Alex, who will talk about how they use ProtoPie and prototyping to innovate for medical devices at Sunrise Labs.
Okay, I'll take over sharing. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. We're really excited to have this talk, and thank you to ProtoPie for inviting us to contribute. So I'm here to talk to you today about how we use ProtoPie to develop innovative medical devices for our clients. Our talk today has 4 parts. We're going to start off with an introduction about Sunrise and medical device development generally, because that'll give us context for the rest of the conversation. Then we're going to transition into talking about how Sunrise drives innovation using prototyping. Third topic is why we've invested in ProtoPie. And then we're going to finish out by sharing some of my team's method for prototyping custom interfaces using ProtoPie. So one caveat, given the nature of this public engagement, I'm not allowed to show you 90% of what the work I do on a daily basis is. Medical devices, they tend to take about 4 to 5 years of development at minimum to see the light of day. And my team's existed for 4 years at Sunrise, and we've been using ProtoPie for 2. I think you can see how the math works here. These are some shots from our portfolio of software-driven medical devices that we've done for both patients and clinicians, just to kind of give you a flavor of devices that we've done. But today we do have some examples that we can show. We've gotten permission from at least one client, and then a little bit on our workflow as well. So Sunrise is a privately owned medical device consultancy in New Hampshire. We've been in business for over 30 years, and we work with a wide variety of clients, from Fortune 100 companies to startups looking to launch their first product. We develop complex software-driven electro-mechanical medical device systems. This typically involves multiple connected components, coordinating patient care across multiple user types. And those user types are looking at very different user interfaces, clinicians, patients, caregivers. They don't look at the product the same way, and they shouldn't be shown the same view of it. But while we don't limit ourselves to specific sectors, we have had strong success in a number of the areas on the screen. Just to kind of break out a couple though, chronic conditions, that's really things like diabetes, cardiology, kidney failure, and neurology. Surgical systems, that's both traditional surgical tools and robotic surgery platforms. Rounding it out with drug delivery, infusion, imaging, diagnostics. We play in a lot of areas. There's over 100 employees at Sunrise. My department, user-centered design, was the most recent expansion. Sunrise added user-centered design a little over 4 years ago, like I mentioned before, and that took us up to the point of being what's called a total product development house. That means we basically can handle any part of the design or development process. We just don't market or sell the medical device for our clients. User-centered design itself is a fairly self-explanatory term, but as a department, we look a little bit different than some of the people on the webinar today. My team is more than just UX or digital product designers. We're a fully integrated team of researchers and designers that consider all aspects of how people interact with the medical devices that heal or maintain their health conditions. We work on digital interfaces, physical interfaces. We also work a lot in safe use and optimizing designs for what humans are capable of doing. UCD at Sunrise has been built with a focus on how we're helping clients to work in disruptive innovation. And these can be both internal innovation-focused teams in a large med tech company, but also on startups in the earliest rounds of funding. We make their innovative vision a tangible concept, prototyping, and then we help to refine it into a product that actually ships, and we help them to get to the point of FDA submission. So, how are we using prototypes to support innovation? Innovation in medical devices, it can fail in many ways, but two really big ones are product market fit or a failure to reduce or remove harm for patients or users. So innovation, it's disruptive by definition. It can open markets. Ideally, it's adding value to people's lives, but in medical devices, there is danger because we're dealing with people's health and well-being. As a consultancy, our clients are looking to the UCD team to reduce business and regulatory risks for product failure. Our collective goal with our clients is always to ensure innovation is a life-changing outcome for the patients that we're here to serve and make sure it won't cause harm. So delivering disruptive product market fit safely, it's a pretty big chunky thing. Each goal needs to be broken down into more manageable tasks. So how we're doing each of those two big goals so that we're not trying to boil an ocean. We use a bunch of different frameworks to get to those manageable chunks, but they all share common elements. Frequent evaluation with both users and stakeholders that can include investors. And building the experience in prototypes unlocks those kinds of evaluations. Typically, we're being asked to answer foundational questions in our work, like, does the user experience overcome barriers to adoption, or is it creating frustration? Can clinical users work with the technology given the spaces that they're working in? Things like personal protective equipment, eyeglasses, hand coverings, things like that. Do they have data access in those environments? Is there yet another device to lug around with them? Can we de-skill the device and open it up to more users? Can they handle that responsibility? Will it create new opportunities for harm? Are there aspects of the system that just won't fit into the use environment? Will it fit into the clinical workflow? Our users aren't always in charge of what they are allowed to do in the spaces that they work. Will we be turning patients' home into a hospital room? If you think about it, that's immersing people in living like a patient, and that's never good for their overall well-being. Are we making people live like a patient instead of a person? You want to return people to a sense of normalcy when you're dealing with healthcare. Are there unforeseen usability issues that could lead to someone being hurt? Can it cause an overdose, an underdose, a misfire? If you think about things like an allergic reaction where a drug intervention is necessary, it's a high stress situation with timing being critical. A misfire means that the drug's no longer available for the patient who needs it. So we have to optimize our devices for human use and to optimize human performance. Will clinical users be able to get an accurate diagnostic result? All these things are the kind of questions that we're answering on a regular basis. So let's talk about why ProtoPie is helpful for us. We're a consultancy. Time is money. Sunrise needs to move efficiently and fail fast to be competitive in our space. The current economic environment is making this even more relevant today. Our work in the left-hand side of this diagram involves smaller teams working in short burst activities, and it's where we burn down most risks to product market fit and usability as much as possible. The right-hand side of the process is a little different than what some of you experience on a regular basis because it's a regulated area. Revising the product vision or definition in this area is a big cost driver, so we try and get it in the left-hand diamond as much as possible. Our goal is always to solve these type of product market fit and usability issues before the project enters the regulated development process. It's inherently less flexible. So how does ProtoPie help us do this? Speed is important, but accuracy is also equally important. The research data that we develop has to build confidence and trust with our clients. Tools on the left-hand side of this chart involve lots of hand waving. So a clickable prototype that you might see from a Figma, that you might see from an InDesign, they're good for a limited use in our experience. But if we're talking a lot and saying, well, imagine this is happening on this screen, imagine this is happening over here, even with still images, those accuracy gaps impact the quality of the data that we generate or the momentum that we can build. The tools on the right are code intensive or fully coded prototypes. They're highly accurate, but clients a lot of times become very precious about them. It can be because of the time that they take to develop or because they're seen as very real. Theoretically, they can be used and taken forward into full, as a basis for development. ProtoPie in the middle is handling the complexity that we need to be accurate while keeping the prototype defined as an investment in learning where we can iterate and we don't have sunk cost fallacies built into what we're developing. We can change the design and evolve quickly. ProtoPie accurately is capturing the design in that moment, and it helps us to limit perfectionism. So when we talk about this, what are the killer applications or use cases for ProtoPie? Some of these were talked about earlier by Rebecca, but for complex medical devices that we're building, we find 4 common use cases that drive us to ProtoPie. Biggest one, nonlinear exploration of the product with state retention. We get to be immersive. If I don't have to handhold someone through it, they're learning and they're experiencing, and we're observing or building momentum. Native keyboard inputs. It's such a small thing, but it allows data entry and keeps the experience immersive. If I'm doing most other types of prototyping, there's hand waving at the point where you have to enter a password or a username or a health condition. Having that native keyboard that's just in the box out of the, from launch in ProtoPie, it's immersive and it keeps people in the experience. Multi-screen, multi-user connected systems which coordinate care through local and cloud connectivity. This is the expected architecture in modern medical device design. Now with ProtoPie, we can actually demo it. And it's surprising how clean that is for us to be able to exhibit what the intention of the system is. And lastly, combining ProtoPie Connect, and block dots, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, it unlocks getting hardware-software interactions, buttons, LED indicators, other types of physical interactions to be able to model the whole user experience. As I said earlier, my team isn't just UX or digital product design. We include industrial designers in the mix. This allows us to be completely collaborative in the experience that we're showing. I talked about momentum earlier. And there's a huge difference between screenshots and a functioning unscripted demonstration of the core product user experience. For what matters to our clients, investors can experience the product and build their trust with its market potential. It's getting them excited and building momentum for our clients. It gets them the money they need to keep their company going and building out that disruptive experience that's going to change the market. Usability testing participants are going to act more naturally when we put this in front of them. Researchers are gathering better data because they aren't facilitating system use, going, well, actually what you would do at this point, or this is what would happen here. The users in the usability testing are experiencing it. We aren't leading the witness. We can do direct observation with low interference, and the data is much richer, and we can trace it to real harm and avoid it right out the gate. So what have we done with ProtoPie? Well, 2 years ago, we started investigating and trialing ProtoPie, but we hadn't taken the leap yet. So we did some brain surgery. Sunrise was asked to create a concept GUI for a startup client demoing the robotic surgery platform for investors. Hardware was the focus, but the client needed a concept GUI to help ensure that investors saw their clinical workflow as credible. Sunrise's first proposal for the code-based functional prototype had about 12-week timeline. The client's demo was in 8 weeks. We committed to the 8-week timeline, but we had pulled back a little bit on what we committed to in the deliverables. We only promised limited function clickable prototypes. But we've been looking at ProtoPie, and we really believe that we could over deliver against that promise by bringing ProtoPie online. So we took the leap. We did some quick work up front to de-risk, could we actually surprise the client and deliver this? And it worked great. The learning curve of ProtoPie was surprisingly small for the power that it delivers. Our team was able to onboard themselves and start building low fidelity during week 1 and start showing the promise. This is the foundation of the methodology that we'll show in a couple of slides from now about how we build using ProtoPie, and we've ironed it out since then. ProtoPie allowed us to focus on the more important aspects of coming up to speed on the clinical workflow for image-guided brain surgery. It's a complex procedure. It's something that we had to learn and onboard ourselves, and the tool was not a distraction. So we were able to simulate key aspects of the clinical workflow in the 8-week window. The MRI image navigation was able to be done here. You can see about alignment of different image sets that have been imported and other expected elements of the system. And that 8 weeks of time included time for a preliminary visual design system. And a fun fact here is we start to scroll through MRI slices, which, honestly, before getting onto ProtoPie, how we would do this, I had no idea. This is the MRI of the actual CEO's brain. He jumped into an MRI tube to give us this input. So it's kind of a fun part of the demo. It's that we're looking at the CEO's brain. So moving forward. Another project that we worked on, it's funny, we had answers for them in an hour. I don't know if everybody on the call knows the difference between a capacitive touchscreen and a resistive touchscreen. Capacitive is the one that we all use on a regular basis. This is your iPhone, your iPad, most touchscreens are this. It's reading, basically the capacitive charge, the ability to feed a charge through your finger, a low voltage feed. And it reads where your finger is on the screen from that direction. Resistive, you're sort of squishing the screen interface. The image isn't very good. It's lower quality, but it's more reliable. But what happens if you start putting all these barriers between your hand and the capacitive screen? Can it even work? It was a big risk for our client. And we were talking to them, and they said, well, can you answer all these questions for us? And said, send us the screen. And once it arrived at our office with the drape, with the glove, with the goo that would be on your hands, because this is going to be used inside a surgical environment where you have to be sterile because you could communicate germs into the body cavity of the patient, which is never any good. We stood it up. We put together a quick, rough touchscreen GUI test with using their touch target sizing. It wasn't their visual design, but we answered the questions in an hour. Yeah, physically this would work. Our client immediately followed up with a ton more questions. And we had like 3 rounds of major refinements to workflow. So we would do a build, we would do a full prototype for them. They'd ship that off. They'd get feedback from KOLs, key opinion leaders, who are, sort of well-known surgeons in the space. And we were answering critical questions for them along the way. Can you validate placement of points? Things that would guide the surgical platform through. Indirect or direct manipulation. Am I touching and dragging, or am I using a different control to manipulate that points movement in space? Finally, we had built the 3rd round, and we're shipping it off to them again for over-the-air deployment, using the cloud features of ProtoPie. And they stopped and said, wait, our mechanical engineers are worried about 7.5 degrees of rotation and not over-promising to surgeons the level of control that they have in this interface point. Sure, give us another day. And we added in the 7.5 degrees limitation to the interface in a rotational control. And it's funny because they just kept giving us new requirements as we're going through, and we were just able to hammer it every time and deliver. And the end result was that the key opinion leaders love the interface, and it answered all the major questions for adoption and usability for this client. And they're well on their way to the latest 510(k) approval that they're seeking out, which is the FDA regulation approach to getting approved for market. Another one that we talked about earlier is de-skilling medical devices. A client came to us and asked us to help prove the business case for de-skilling their device. It would help them to increase the users and the ways that the device is used by their customers. They believed it would lead to more sales. And we start off with, before ProtoPie, doing some screenshots that they could take in and do some research with. And they found that an iPhone app wouldn't work, bring your own device wouldn't work. But they were interested in de-skilling the actual interface of their device. And they said, okay, what if we started bringing in something roughly iPad size? And said, great, we'll throw it on an iPad, we'll do a ProtoPie prototype, we'll do an evolution of the user experience and the visual design based on what you've learned. And again, this internal innovation team within our client, they had a great experience with our delivery. And it's a team of software engineers, and they asked for the raw prototype, which we always deliver to our clients, and they got pretty nerdy about it in the best possible way. And they went and bought ProtoPie themselves, and they were custom coding Arduinos to get all of the physical interactions, because we didn't know this. They had a bunch of 3D prints of their industrial design for this new device sitting there, and they were looking to stick this iPad inside it. And now they're able to get all of the physical interface interactions built into that device. And they now become somebody that we sometimes exchange tools and tricks with. And we meet with them on a regular basis, and it's a great fun thing. Every client that we've delivered for with ProtoPie has gone out and bought it for themselves, either to make edits or to do other evolutions which don't make sense to send out of house. So let's talk about what our method is. First things first, stop, don't be a savage. You have to save your sanity, name things. It's going to seem like it's slowing you down, but you're going to run into a little bit of a wall midway through your build. It always happens. As you're building out multiple interactions, you're going to have to debug mid-build, and it's going to help you so much. Develop a unique naming system with relationships that are called out. So if I have a dot and I have a controller that moves that dot around, I have dot one and I have d-pad dot one. And that relationship, when you're trying to debug and go through, you can go into the search bar in the upper right-hand corner of all of your interactions or in your layer menu and search for that. And it just takes you right there, and it's going to speed you up from midway on outwards, where we find most of the time is lost. So this is the major steps, and then we're going to dive into what a tech de-risk build actually looks like in the next 2 slides after this. But we start off by prioritizing, always prioritizing what is critical to the investor demo or to the user experience testing that we're doing, and what is going to be the most difficult. Multiply those 2 together and you get where you need to focus. Then we do a tech de-risk build. It's a 1 to 2 day, honestly, we try for 1 day or less, iterative process where we're doing multiple builds free of visual design, where we are just trying to get the functionality up and working. If we can get that done, then we start importing visual assets and replacing layers and refining it. And lastly, once you have all of that working together, you start using copy and paste and remapping of functions to scale up your prototype. It's easy to get excited about the big picture, but you got to start with the smallest possible interaction when you're building custom interfaces in ProtoPie. Adding incremental layers of complexity as you prove out your approach with single goal builds. So we start small and we build up. It's going to seem slower at first, but it delivers speed when you run into a wall midway through. How does it do that? When you expect bugs and you're doing this gradual increase of complexity, you're going to know where it broke. And so when we do this, we literally sit down and we plan out each of the scenes, and we say, okay, this is when we should jump between scenes, and this is when we should stop with this interaction and move on to the next. We whiteboard it out, and we look at the different methods that we could be using within the periodic table that ProtoPie provides of their interactions and their outcomes. We build small to prove the method, and we just keep increasing the complexity in small pieces. This is an example of that. I have taken this from what was a client build and completely removed any visual design and any reference to their work. But this is an example where we have a bunch of orange points labeled P1 through 4. We have a selector in the lower piece, so we can indirectly select a point with the P1, P2, P3, P4 white and blue buttons. And you have a directional pad like your Nintendo to indirectly control. So the goals of this prototype were to touch and drag. So you can directly manipulate any orange point. So I can literally grab and move it. I also want to indirectly control it for accuracy. If I'm wearing gloves or doing other things, then having that indirect but more accurate nudging. So if I select a point using either tap to select of an orange point or I tap to select of one of the blue controls, I can then start nudging an orange point using the directional pad. So one tap moves an increment, but we also wanted a long touch in the D-pad to move as a repeat move. The nudge and touch features obviously are going to interfere with each other because they're using the same sense. I'm either touching down, I'm tapping, it's the same input. The build style that I just described to you allowed us to identify where those conflicts were happening as we're going through trying to figure out what the right approach was. So we got the easy part down first, like touch to drag, that's out of the box from ProtoPie. You can just use that as it is. The nudge, tap once on the D-pad for north, and then 0.1 will move one increment. We just focused on one direction in the D-pad and one point. We then figured out through multiple rounds of effort, usually about a quarter day to a half day of trial and error, that an opacity change on long touch. So if I hold down north heading up on the D-pad, will change the opacity of that button. We used a conditional detect to cause a repeated move in 0.1. Once we had that working and we could tap once to get it to move, you hold it down and it goes shooting off the page. Great, we know that that works. We can now add stop. And once we had that final completion of the long touch feature, we started to copy and paste. So north becomes also south, and we remap all of those interactions just to 0.1. Then we do east and west on the D-pad, and then suddenly we've got a fully functional point. Then we copy and paste multiple versions of that D-pad for 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and so on and so forth. With a quick show and hide, all of a sudden you've got this fully functional interface that looks like it is just happening all off the same D-pad with selectors, but we built it simply because we kept it simple. So down the right-hand side of the page, you can see it looks like a pretty long build. This goes on for multiple scrollings of the page, but most of that is copy and paste. We did it once, and this is what you looked at when we built it the first time. And then it's all copy and paste from on, and it builds at speed once you get to that point. So in total, that's the presentation. We hope that this was helpful and educational to see how we are building using ProtoPie to unlock our clients' innovation and helping them to put nonlinear interfaces in front of investors and users to make sure that we're on the right track. If you're interested in connecting, I believe ProtoPie is going to put my LinkedIn contact into the chat. And then also, if you want to work with us, feel free to contact Barbara Gibney. She's our director of marketing, and we would love to hear from you if you want to collaborate with us on a consulting program.
Thank you, Alex, for an outstanding and inspiring presentation. I would like, Rebecca, if you could post in the chat those two pieces of information that Alex just mentioned. Okay, now.
I can stop sharing here.
Okay, thank you. And then I will share my screen. Right, let's kick off the much awaited Q&A session. The way how we will do this, I will go to the Q&A window and cherry pick some of the questions. We have quite a lot to cover, so I will try to kind of categorize them by theme. Right, let's see. Can you tell us, so Andy is asking, what prototyping tools did you use before ProtoPie? Can you tell us a little bit about what the process was before ProtoPie at Sunrise Labs?
I will go back through my own personal experience. I've been a designer for 25 years at this point. I go all the way back to Axure RP as a interactive prototyping platform. We've looked at Envision, we've looked at Sketch and other products that are out there. The more code base they were, the less I tended to investigate them because it's just not my natural language. I started off with my degree in industrial design. I physically build prototypes. Using UX tools and UI tools is a very, it's an area that I'm very comfortable in. And we went into areas which were biased towards those kind of tool sets because that's where our team lives. We have a whole robust team of 35 software engineers who are ready to jump in on code. So for our particular organization, it made more sense to bias towards more layout tools for prototyping. Hopefully that answers your question, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. So that kind of ties in with, let's see, there was a question about how you learn ProtoPie and about whether you have a background in coding, Alex.
I do not, but we find with adult learning principles, so a good part of my job is behavioral design and psychology. And as I develop my team, I use some of those same principles. And so if you're learning something for the first time, doing it when there's a critical task, delivering a project, that's when you actually solidify what you're trying to achieve, because there are very real criteria and very real goals. We don't do that loosely with client-funded work, but we will work in a platform to a basic level of competency, and we will look for the right fit where we can start delivering to clients at low risk to them and to us, and we will build it out from there. But we do spend time outside work or during areas where we don't have current contract, where we are investing time and making sure that we're building up best practices. And so it's just constant repetitive efforts to find interesting things and build them.
Thank you. I hope this covers it. Right, let's see. So Tatiana is asking, how do you guide your users and stakeholders through your prototypes? Do you take time explaining the concept of what a high fidelity prototype is?
During the proposal phase of when we are working to help define the engagement with our clients, absolutely. We will talk about goals and what they wish to achieve. On longer term projects, sometimes 2 to 3 years, we'll advise them of when it fits and when it's appropriate. And when we're going to users, we try and my ideal is we want to be hands-off during those usability studies. The more we can just be directly observational, the research that we do in those usability studies is something that we will send to the FDA. And the science of those observational research engagements needs to be sound. Otherwise, the FDA can reject our results and tell us that it was not sound enough in terms of our study design. So we prefer anything that can get us to hands-off, which is leaning more towards high fidelity. But it really is a case-by-case basis based on the outcomes that our clients want to achieve or the de-risking that we can do by leveraging tools like this.
Thank you, Tatiana. I hope that answers your question. So you mentioned something about FDA approval and submission. So Valeria is asking something around that. I'm working with medical device clinical trials in Europe. So I'm curious if your prototype made in ProtoPie are part of medical device submission to FDA. If yes, what format would be used in this case?
Not directly. We would use we would supply a research report based on the usability work that we've done. So for the broader audience, when you're doing clinical trial work or when you're doing an FDA submission for approval so that you can begin to sell the medical device, there is risk-based evaluations that my team is doing for the usability of it. Can it lead to harm? So when we design those studies, we may reference the fact that we were using a prototype. It's an indirect reference, though. The FDA isn't going to review our ProtoPie prototype, but they are going to look at what it was doing and how we use that as part of the overall design of the study, and if the science is sound in the way that we used it. So if we said that alarms and alerts, for example, medical devices are designed not to get into those states, as you would imagine. If there's an alarm, that's a bad situation that we're usually trying to avoid. The predictability of being able to control the exact circumstance, for example, with using a multi-screen interface, I can have a phone next to me where I can hit a button and cause an alarm to happen within a ProtoPie prototype. That's really valuable at many different points throughout our development process. But the actual outcome of that we would send to a regulatory reviewer for a clinical trial or for an approval would be the report on the usability findings from that, saying, yes, our designs have been effective at managing use-related risk.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Let's see. Let's cover user testing.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. So Alexander is asking, do you use remote research or tests? If so, how do you do it?
We have. We like in person when it's feasible, but definitely during COVID, we found that there were moments where it was not feasible, and we can deploy over web. And in some cases, we'll deploy to clients and they will take it to in-person. So we're not always the people in the room. We prefer it because we are getting hands-on learning along with our clients. But we use all of the methodology that ProtoPie allows. So we might deploy a link to someone's cell phone. We may ask for a common cell phone to be used in a room that's controlled by the client where they have the app downloaded and we can deploy that way. We're consultancy. We're hitting all the high notes of every way that you can deploy it because there's always a circumstance which is unique that we have to rise to the challenge of.
Right, thank you. So yeah, I wanted to remind everyone that we recently launched user testing on ProtoPie Cloud. So that's like live user testing that you can run with your testers, with your stakeholders. Thank you. Let's see. Let's talk handoff. Can you talk us a little bit about what the handoff process is like? How do you work with developers, with engineers?
They know where I sit, so I have to be very responsive to them. That's part of our integrated delivery. We are a total product development house, so I work directly with a lot of the engineers, the software engineers especially, but also the mechanical engineers, the electrical engineers. Every part of what we develop, we're highly integrated as a team. When our client has some of these same capabilities, it makes us really responsive to them because we know what works. But we definitely have a 5-part handoff methodology where it's the architectures, the flow maps, the screen specifications, and ProtoPie prototypes are highly valuable for communicating, especially critical experiences. But honestly, with all the tools that we have, including we're looking forward to doing more with the handoff tools that have been added that Rebecca was really eloquent about talking about. It never overcomes and never beats the connection between two people talking about what the intent was. There's a lot of working together as part of the sprint process in the Agile methodology that allows us to be very effective as a team communicating. And the less hand waving, as I said earlier, that we are, the better the outcome, because it's like, oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I could do that. And when you start getting into some of the things that ProtoPie can leverage, like native camera views, the ability to pull in APIs from Google Maps or other places, it becomes so much more effective at lowering barriers when people can see, like, you know what, I get what you're talking about. I'm not over imagining it, and less hand waving. I'll keep coming back to that point. The less hand waving you are, the more effective handoff is.
Okay, that answers it for me. Thank you. Siddharth is asking, how would you design the UX of a medical monitoring device for the general user instead of an expert? What would the process be like?
We would have to look at the use case very specifically and then have a strategy on what that would do to improve outcomes for the patient or for a low-skilled user, what their capabilities are, what the trust is from their organization. So if it's a clinical user and we're de-skilling it down a level within that clinical team, what's their role, what's appropriate to what they can do? And we're talking disruption, so we're going to be interrupting the clinical workflow. So what is the value that the clinical team as a whole is getting out of this? And then how are we ensuring that risk won't happen? I can't speak to your direct experience, but one of the things that we've found in diabetes is sometimes there aren't enough specialists to go around, and getting an appointment with a specialist makes it much more difficult. So the folks who are prescribing insulin and the escalation into insulin therapies are becoming lower skill users than the high skilled specialists who really understand the inner workings and the biology of what drives the need for insulin in diabetes patients. We have to deliver products for titrating insulin doses. We have to deliver software which helps them to understand the prescription process. So, if Yulia and I are both getting prescribed insulin, giving us the same dosing isn't correct. I have a very different body type. I have very different stresses in my life. All the things that impact the uptake of insulin, we can't use it the same way for people. So giving tools that reduce the risk of an error being made in the prescription or in the interpretation of a patient monitor are critical to the outcomes that we would drive towards in the medical device system that you're describing.
Awesome. Thank you for a detailed response to that. Okay. Olga is asking, given that you can move so much faster through the prototyping process and make more iterations of concepts, how do you balance building further with a client versus scope creep?
Scope creep, I'm going to interpret that in terms of like perfectionism in the prototype, I'm going to guess, or if it's scope creep in the features, that's a different thing. So perfectionism in the prototype, it's really about being grounded in the strategy of what we're trying to learn and achieve. And if we can get to a good understanding with the client, we can nail it. And if they want to learn additional things, we'll evaluate if we can fit that into the design of the study and the lead up to the product, the delivery of the prototype. That incremental one that I talked to you about, where in an hour we answered their initial question, like we were getting additional features all the time and we were absorbing them because our build style was one that we could keep layering the complexity onto. We got lucky and skillful at the same time, I guess. Now, in terms of scope creep, we have frameworks that we use to help avoid feature scope creep, especially when it doesn't fit the product. We've got, there's a fellow named Jesse James Garrett, who is a very well-known thought leader in UX design. He's got something called the 5 layers of design. We follow that process. If you're not familiar with it, I welcome you to go Google Jesse James Garrett. He's a smart guy. And we use that to help manage scope creep in attaching what was the strategy of why the product exists all the way through to the visual design. If you break that chain, then it's a really helpful framework to use to drive the discussion with your clients about where we might need to change our strategy or why we might clip that feature.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jesse James Garrett. So I just saw Siddharth asking that question.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have a lot of questions, so we will try to cover them all. Okay, Amit is asking, can you speak about 3D prototypes plus embedded components via Arduino components? What does the workflow look like at the high level? Does your team use block dots with ProtoPie?
We are pushing into that more deeply, but yes, we do. We have not gotten to the full depth that we envision with that. As I said, my team works, I'm an industrial designer by background. I started my career, of all things, cutting shoe tread in foam models by hand with an X-Acto knife. And you can imagine how detailed shoe tread is. And this was for a large shoe company outsourcing prototypes. I started my career before there was CNC was an affordable option for many people. So 3D prototyping is core to what we do here. I have a wonderful director of mechanical engineering who shares a wall with me. We talk quite frequently about how we can be prototyping the total experience. Block dots is exactly in our wheelhouse because it is a visual programming program. It's a visual programming product for getting Arduino stood up and working. And for what we want to do at speed, it is a perfect pairing with ProtoPie, and we are into it and we love it. But yeah, we're trying to get to the point of doing some examples of what we would do with those builds. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll hopefully see a video or a case study from us soon enough demonstrating what the potential of that collaborative platform is with 3D printing and everything else involved.
Thank you, Alex. I'm looking forward to that.
VP of Business Development is watching me carefully going, yeah, when you
yeah.
things.
Okay. Alex, what hurdles did you encounter bringing a screen into a sterile field? We have hardware that sits within the sterile field, but our system itself is outside. Besides glue on your hands, what other issues were encountered adding a screen into the sterile field?
Visibility, reflectivity of the drape, for example. So there's just a single sheet that gets adhered onto it. Changeover, cross-contamination, all of the management of sterile field is exactly part of that. We have some clients that will go the direction of having a secondary user actually manipulate the controls. A scrub tech or somebody else who might be outside the field while the surgeon is inside the field manipulating other controls. In this case, for the example that I gave, it made sense to put the touchscreen interface directly into and proximal to the patient. So like it's right next to where the open site is and where things are going on, because you want the surgeon right up in there and able to see what's going on, even though it's a surgical robotics platform. The work that they were doing, it was aided by the proximity of the surgeon to the experience. The other thing that does, I focus a lot on the humans. So as we're talking about clinical effectiveness, surgical spaces are inhabited by teams. And when you take a surgeon out of that team experience, it changes the dynamic and it changes their effectiveness. It's just like a sports team. Any major league sports team that you can pick, soccer, football, I'm sorry, for the non-Americans, and basketball, baseball, pick your flavor. You take your star out of that, and suddenly the team dynamic changes. The same in a surgical space. So if you have them off in a corner outside of the scrubbed-in area, you have to account for what risk that it creates. If you're keeping them in there, how do you bring the device into there? You want to limit the number of components that are coming into there, because there's a whole litany of things that happen with turnover, cleanliness, protection, making sure that you're not transferring germs or bugs into the patient. It's an exponential list that I could give you here, but when I find it comes down to, it's a lot about team dynamic, and do you want the surgeon in that space, or is it okay for them to be a little bit more removed from the direct patient bedside?
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of 4 minutes, literally. So I will pick up the question that has the biggest number of upvotes.
Okay.
And let's see. And it's about, let's see. Okay. So the question comes from Emmanuel Haas. Often visual design fueled with the design system lives in a design tool like Figma, where it constantly changes and receives updates. How do you make sure to keep UI designs and assets in sync with your prototype?
Usually before we'll go to a build, there is a moment in time where we sort of lock and say, okay, this is what we're deploying in this moment. I will fully acknowledge that my use cases are going to be different than an in-house team. An in-house team is working a lot more with a robust design system that's been built over generations of their device. I am standing up the first preliminary design system, or at least the early skeleton of a design system for our clients, because what we're working with typically hasn't been built before, especially in the innovation space. But we have to call it. We have to make a line in time where we're going to cut over into a prototype. You'll notice that when I said our build methodology was initially focused on getting the functionality stood up, part of that is from working with clients that have been working on their design systems, and they're radically changing them as we're going through. You can see that we move quickly when we're trying to get to these builds. Some of the timelines that we're talking about, they're rushed. In a more robust design program, we're including this as part of the overall development, which can take weeks to months to years. And we will have the time to say, okay, at this moment, we can put a line in the sand and say, let's go evaluate, because we built it up enough that the design system can't just continue on. We have to evaluate. So we'll put a hold on one set of activities to cut over, get information, and then come back again. And while we're doing that, we're prepping for research, we're doing other kinds of activities to get out and deploy. But the design team might work on the next design item from the backlog, or from the design debt that's accrued from the last research activity. So some similarities to what in-house designers experience, some uniqueness, because we are a consultancy.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Unfortunately, we will not be able to cover all of them today, but I would encourage you to reach out to Alex on LinkedIn. We posted his LinkedIn link in the chat, and I'm sure he will be more than welcoming and more than willing to further discuss. We are approaching, we're past 1 minute past the top of the hour. Thank you, Alex, for handling the Q&A so graciously and for providing us with these amazing insights. Right, so I would like to offer all of you this discount code that you can use to have a 30% discount off our Pro plan, yearly and monthly. I encourage all of you to join ProtoPioneers. It's our online community where you can get help, engage with other ProtoPie users and designers in general. And thank you so much, Alex and Sunrise Labs, for sharing your story with us and for inspiring us all. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you to the ProtoPie team, and thank you everyone who took part in today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. I will see you at the next one.
Thank you to the ProtoPie team for supporting us through this and helping us to put together